Do I look like a siren to you? We have a new launch from Blend Bunny and I am so excited about this one. I'm going to be doing some detailed swatches for you, and then I'm going to show you how to get this look in the tutorial portion. And then at the end of the video, I'll give you my first impressions and thoughts on the palette. Also, hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nupur and I love indie makeup and all things color and sparkle. If you're new here, I like to do really detailed and informative overviews of new launches. So if that sounds good to you, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like because it really helps me out and I super appreciate it. Before we get started, I do want to make a few notes / disclaimers, with the first one being that I did receive this palette in PR, and this time I was actually commissioned to do swatches for Blend Bunny's website, which this is my first time doing that, so I'm really quite excited about that. And that means that you will be able to see my swatches on the website on launch day. I am also an affiliate with the brand, and my code is just my name, Nupur, which will save you 10% off your order, and I'll get a small commission if you use it. And thank you so much if you use it. I truly appreciate it. That being said, please don't feel pressured to purchase this palette because my goal with this video is just to give you as much information as possible about the palette. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the launch details. Here's the palette. It's launching on February 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it will retail for $45. Here's the cover. It has custom artwork by Isabel Stobe. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but the artwork really reflects the theme, and the cover has some embossed details and a holographic effect in some areas too. Here's the inside. The color story is arranged in quads. I want to mention that the palette is magnetic, so you can remove each pan and rearrange or swap out the shades for other Blend Bunny shades. Currently, the only palettes that are magnetic, aside from this one, are Ellis and Lynn's palettes, as well as plastic. Here are all of the mattes from the palette together. The matte formula is the usual Blend Bunny formula, not a lot of kick up in the pen, and very pigmented but easy to blend. I swatched each pair of light and dark shades together. And then really quickly, I want to show all the dark mattes together so you can see the differences and nuances between them. I'll be talking a bit more about these at the end. Hi, it's Nupur here from hours later filming B-roll, and I forgot to mention during the video that the way that I do my shimmer swatches is a specific way. So basically what I do is I have an opaque swatch up here and then a sheer swatch down here, just so you can get two different looks at the shimmer. And then the other thing that I do is when I'm moving my hand back and forth in front of the camera like this, I give you both an in-focus shot and an out-of-focus shot just so you can see all the texture and sparkle and multicolored flecks and all of that. Intoxicating is a deep shimmer with a blackened base and multicolored sparkles that are silver, red, purple, and pink. This one is very smooth but also a little hard pressed and squishy in the pan. The base itself is not that shiny, so the majority of sparkle comes from the different colored flecks. Some of the flecks shift, but the overall effect of the shade isn't super shifty. Deadly Fate is another deep shimmer with a black and brown base and multicolored sparkles. The sparkles here don't stand out much individually from a distance since they are so tiny, so the shadow mostly appears to be a shimmery deep brown. This one is very smooth and not as sparkly as the other shades, but still has some twinkle. Carnivorous has a rich and deep, but not black and berry base with purple, pink, and red sparkles. The different colored sparkles are close on the color wheel and all blend together to give a more uniform effect rather than dimensional. The sparkles do shift, but very softly. It has a bit of sparkle, but is more shiny and very smooth. It's a little harder pressed and takes a couple layers to build up. Lull and Slay is one of the lighter shades in the palette. It has a sheer purpley gray base with multicolored sparkles that are silver, purpley pink, and tiny pinpricks of red. The non-silver sparkles do shift lightly, but it's not that visible. This one does have a visibly dimensional look and is very sparkly. It has a tiny bit of texture, but is still very smooth when applied. Her Prey is a duochrome with a warm pink base and gold sparkles. The sparkles do not shift at all, but they are pretty sparkly. This one feels soft in the pan, but not squishy. It is easy to pick up and smooths out easily. Atargatis, I'm not sure how to pronounce this one, has a vibrant hot pink base with purple and pink sparkles that shift to gold. This one is pretty smooth and seems a little hard pressed in the pan, but was easy to build up. This one has a medium amount of sparkle and the flecks themselves are a very fine particle size. It did not stain on me. Irresistible has a very pigmented teal base with a mix of green and blue sparkles throughout. Those flecks are not very visible individually unless you're staring up close, but they make the shimmer more than just a standard teal. It is very sparkly and has a medium particle size with a little texture but smooths out easily. Cursed has a black base with a bunch of different multicolored sparkles. I mostly see yellow, pink, and blue. This one is very smooth with a fine particle size, so it's a little hard to make out the individual colors from a distance. It almost looks like an oil slick from far away. It has a good amount of sparkle and shine to it, and it's a really unique shade. Under has a black and navy base with silver and blue sparkles that don't shift. The base itself is not shimmery at all, which really allows the sparkles to twinkle even though they have a small particle size. This shadow is very soft and squishy and also a bit hard pressed, which means it takes a little effort to build up. Mesmerizing is a duochrome with a rich reddish brown base and green shimmer that does not shift. This one has a very fine particle size and is super smooth. The shimmer is more shiny than sparkly, but it's still very reflective. I would also argue this one is a cousin of the blue-brown type of OG duochrome shade. Trance has a grungy base with a gold shimmer that leans a touch chartreuse and doesn't shift. I wouldn't necessarily call this a duochrome, but there is a distinction between the deep base and the lighter shimmer. This one is very smooth. It has some sparkle to it, but it is also very shiny and uniformly reflective. Immerse is another one of the lighter shades in the palette. It has a sheer purple base with sparkles that shift light blue to purple. This one is very sparkly. It has some texture in the pan but smooths out easily. It is pretty soft, but I wouldn't call it squishy. Okay, for the look, I know that you've already seen it, but I don't really know what I want to do yet, fully. I do know that I want to use some of the purple and blue tones and maybe some green or teal, but we'll see. I'm going to start with the purple shade Beckon, and this is going to go right into my crease. I like to build very, very slowly, especially with shades as pigmented as these. And in case you don't know how I do my tutorials, usually what I do is I have the step that I'm currently doing on this eye already done on this eye. That way you can see as I'm building what my end goal is. So one of the reasons that I wanted to use this shade is of all the mattes in the palette, this one was just a little bit harder to build up in my swatches. And I don't think it's the fault of the shadow. I swatch on bare skin, so matte shadows will naturally have a harder time sticking down, but this type of purple it's not a neon at all, but it's quite bright, and I find that mattes like this have a formula that's kind of halfway between a regular matte and a neon in that it's a bit more powdery and blends better over primer than it does on bare skin, and I just wanted to make sure that it did blend well over primer. Now I'm just lightly buffing the edges out, and then also tapering it inwards, but not too much. I feel like that blended out really easily, especially considering that it is a purple shade, which is by nature harder to formulate, and also considering that there aren't any lighter shades to blend this out with, so I think that looks pretty good. I took more of that purple shade Beckon, and I'm putting this all over the lid, and I don't really care how evenly this applies to the lid because I'm just putting it down as a base for a shimmer that I'm going to be layering over it. Next, I'm going to take this dark blue Abyss, and I'm going to start by packing that on my outer corner, and oh man, I didn't tap off my brush enough because I got a little bit of fallout, so hang on. I tried my best to fix it, but if you see some specks, just ignore it. I usually tap off my brush a little bit better, but I guess not today. After packing it on, I'm feathering it slightly inwards, and then I'm starting to blend it outwards. And then I'm also slightly blending it into the purple in the crease. Considering how deep and dark this navy is, that took like no time at all to blend out. I did lose a little bit of depth as I blended out, so I'm just adding a little bit more pigment over here. Now I'm going to take this lighter shade Watery Grave, and that's going to go along my entire lower lash line. I'm focusing the pigment here on the inner part, and then as necessary, I will add more and more until I reach the outer edge. I'm just slowly building it up, and then I am bringing it a little further down than I usually do. Then taking more of that navy shade on a tiny pencil brush, and that's going to go right on the outer edge of my lower lash line, very, very tight to the lash line. Since I have a lot of mattes on my lid, I'm going in with some Vernay Pixie Epoxy, and I'm just tapping that all over my lid. Then while that is drying, I'm keeping my eyes shut, and I'm going to take some of this shimmer right here and tap that all over my lid as well. And I'm just using a brush to get into the inner third where my nails can't let my finger reach. I also use a brush to get all the way up my lid without going too far into the crease. This shimmer is so pretty and glowy. I love it. And then I actually want to use a bit of a darker shimmer on my outer corner. So I'm just tapping that shade on the very outer third of my lid. And I'm not taking it really past my lid, but I am feathering it slightly inwards into the previous shimmer. Next, I'm going to do something that I do quite a bit, which is to use a teal shimmer on my lower lash line. So I did spray the brush with setting spray before, or rather after picking up the shade, just because I have a lot of mattes on my lower lash line, and I don't like to use glitter glue down there, but I still want this to look very intense. And I also want to avoid as much fallout as possible, so that's why I always use setting spray for my lower lash line shimmers. I also intentionally laid down some mattes before because while I do want the teal sparkles to be really vibrant, I do want there to be some depth underneath that because this is a siren look after all. For the inner corner, I'm going to take this shade with a very, very light hand. And then I'm just going to put it here. And then I'm also going to run it right here. And as always, up through the swoop as well. I will say, if you're any lighter than me, I don't know if you would be able to use this shade as an inner corner shade without it leaving some kind of cast. And even on me, there is a bit of a cast because I meant to go in with a light hand, but then I wanted more sparkle, so I added more product on, and here we are. And I know that this looks intense because it is supposed to be an intense look. It's a siren smoky eye. But let me put my mascara on and choose a lip color, and hopefully it'll pull everything together. Here's the final look now that I have my mascara and lip combo on, and I'll have all of the details of the rest of my makeup in the description box. But really quickly, I want to mention that this Robert Welsh Blend Bunny Divination Gloss Balm, I want to say, is the final step of my lip combo because I mean, I thought it matched this look so perfectly, I had to use it. And here it is with different lighting and settings so that you can see all of that sparkle and texture because in person, this look is so beautiful and I just really love how it came out. Before we get into my thoughts on this palette, I just want to emphasize that this is more of a first impressions and not a review. I need to use this palette a lot more before I can give you a proper review. The first thing I need to say, because I forgot to say it in the launch details, is that there will be some bundle deals with Beauty Below as well as Lure and Trove, I think. So just make sure you check out the site on launch day for those deals. So this palette is a little bit heavier than other Blend Bunny palettes that I have. And I think it's because it has both a mirror as well as magnetic pans. And when I say it's a little heavy, it's just something I noticed the first time I picked it up, but I don't notice it now that I am aware of it, if that makes sense. Now, personally, I am a fan of magnetic palettes because I like to do a lot of BYOPs and move my shades around and things like that. And one thing that I want to point out is since this palette is a little on the large and heavy side, it's maybe not the most ideal for traveling, but because it's magnetic, you can take out the pans and put them into an empty magnetic palette, or you can even put them into something like plastic because that palette is also magnetic and it's a lot smaller. So I think making a lot of the palettes magnetic now is really allowing you to make your own little Blend Bunny custom color stories that you can then take with you anywhere. And I know that there was some concern about the pricing of this palette because magnetic pans do tend to increase, manufacturing costs, but I did check and this palette is $45, which is only $1 more than Lure, which is at $44. So I think it's a really fair price considering that this palette has double the amount of shimmers that Lure does. So let's talk about the color story because I do really like this. I think that I am particularly attracted to color stories where there are both vibrant, punchy shades as well as muted / murky tones. And this palette has both of them, which I really appreciate. And then the other thing that I really appreciate is that there are multiple deepening up options that are both neutral as well as colorful. And this brings me to my next point. I have seen some concern about the deeper mattes in this palette looking too similar to each other and translating as just black. And I don't think that that's true. I'll pop up a clip here with all of the deep mattes swatched next to each other so you can see that they really aren't that similar. And the only two to me that are kind of similar are the deep brown up here and the black matte over here. And personally, I'm actually not a fan of black mattes. I feel like they can get out of control really fast, and I much prefer a deep brown in the place of a deep black. But hey, this palette is magnetic, so I can just take out the black matte and swap it for something else. The other thing that I want to mention is that when you have a medium or deep complexion, a lot of times palettes just don't go deep enough to add the depth that some people like in, you know, the outer corner, or just to bring depth to a look in general to give it dimension, right? And so many palettes are lacking in deep options, but there are so many palettes out there that have lighter pastel shades that are also essential for people with lighter complexions. So the way I see this palette is that it is very melanin friendly. Lastly, the way that I use deepening options, and that I know some people do as well, is typically just on the outer corner for definition. And when you're doing that, you're typically blending them into lighter, usually mid-tone shades, which when you start to do that, the undertones of these mattes come out as well. So they don't usually stay at that depth unless you pack on more pigment. So I just want to quickly note that. And yes, this palette is lacking in lighter pastel options, but again, personally, I don't really use those a lot. They go untouched in most of the palettes I have. I'll use them here and there, but quite honestly, I would much rather just blend out a mid-tone shade until I get the effect that I want. Okay, now let's move on to the shimmers, because this is the most shimmers that Blend Bunny has ever done in a palette. And it's not their first time doing an equal amount of mattes and shimmers. They did that in plastic as well, but plastic was a lot smaller. So this is definitely the most shimmers we've ever had in at least in a 24 pan Blend Bunny palette. And I was actually recently just saying that I wish brands would go back to making at least some like regular shimmers that aren't necessarily duochrome or multichrome or super textured or high impact and stuff, because I'm someone who really enjoys playing with layering shimmers over mattes, layering shimmers with each other or other more special shades, and I think the shimmers in this palette work really well for that. And because none of the shimmers in here are true multichromes, you only have at most some duochromes or some shimmers with multicolored sparkles, I think that is what is keeping the price of this palette from being too high. There are a couple of things that I want to point out about the shimmers, and the first one is that most of the shimmers in this palette are medium depth or super deep and dark, and so if you prefer lighter shimmers, I don't know if this palette is for you. But I do think that this palette would pair really well with Noctilucent, which has been discontinued, but if you have it, it would match really well with this palette. The second thing that I want to note is that some of the shimmers in this palette are a little on the soft and squishy side, and you can even see over here, like this one I really had to press into, and this one as well. And typically that is a sign that they could crease if you have issues with creasing, so I really can't speak to the longevity of the shimmers because I just don't typically struggle with creasing that way. Lastly, I did get some requests to do comparisons, but I unfortunately don't have lures, so I can't really do proper thorough comparisons, but I will hold up all of the palettes that I own from Blend Bunny side by side with Beauty Below just so you can see any similarities between the palettes. Here is Beauty Below next to Blends. Then here it is next to Surge, which is discontinued. Here it is next to Primal, which is also discontinued. Here it is next to Machina, which is again discontinued. Here it is next to Taj's collab, Little Miss She Never Misses. Then here's Divination, which is Robert Welsh's collab palette. Then here's the last collab palette that I have, which is from Lynn's Makeup Looks. Then I also wanted to show it with some of the neutral palettes. So here's Dollhouse, which is discontinued. Then here it is with All Done Up. And lastly, here it is with Longing. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching till the end. It really means the world to me. And if you made it till the end, why don't you leave a comment with, I don't know, what's your favorite siren lore if you're into that? Also, I know that I've been doing a lot of new launch videos, and that's not all I want my channel to be. So I actually have a video planned for later this week with my first full-length get ready with me / tutorial, and I'll be going really slow in that one because I know a lot of you have been asking for even more slower paced talk through tutorials where I really take my time to explain each step. So that's coming up next, and I hope you stick around for it. Once again, please give this video a like and consider subscribing if you enjoyed it so that I can see you in the next one. Bye!